Today's date is March 26, 2021, and I am very excited to introduce the Persian mythology to you. Most of the mythology that I know of have been learned, I have read in Shahnameh Ferdowsi. Shahnameh was written by Ferdowsi about 1000 years ago, and he was a great poet and tried to assemble the Persian mythology and history as much as possible. Of course, in these stories, in his stories, he tried to make the Persians look very civilized, and the Persian people are civilized, and in order to give this sense of greatness to them, he created heroes such as Rostam. Now, we are going to talk about Rostam today, and Rostam was the son of Zal, and Zal was the son of Sam, and Sam was the son of Nariman. Nariman was the grandson of the last mythological king of Persia. Well, now, Nariman was a hero. He was very patriotic and fought for the kings. And afterwards, his son Sam, he also fought for the kings of Persia at the time. And afterwards, he gave birth to a son. At his birth, when Zal was born, he had white hair and white eyebrows, and people around Sam considered him as an evil omen and advised Sam to abandon Zal at the base of Alborz Mountains in the north of Iran. Alborz mountain range runs from the east to the west of Iran, or Persia at the time. There was a bird, a legendary bird called Simorgh. Simorgh is a legendary bird, and it is supposed to be nested at the top of the Alborz mountain. So as Zal was abandoned at the base of the Alborz mountain by his father Sam, Simorgh, the legendary bird, came and took him from the valley to his nest at the top of the mountain where Zal grew up with his or her other chicks. And so whatever Seymour was feeding his chicks, he was also feeding Zal. And so Zal got to grow up with Seymour's chicks, and he grew up to be a very strong man. And afterwards, he decided to leave leave Seymour and Alborz Mountain, and in order to go and find his family and Sam. Okay, as he was departing from Seymour, Seymour told Zal that I will give you three of my feathers, and if in case you need my help, or in case anyone in Persia, in Iran, would ever need my help, all you have to do is burn one of the feathers, and I would immediately come to their rescue. So Zal, he went back to the city and to his family, and Sam, and he was now a very strong and tall man with long white hair, like albinos. And after some time, he married Rudabe. And after 9 months, Rudabe was going to give birth to Rostam. Now, Rostam is the legendary hero of Shahnameh and the legendary hero of Persia. So what happened was, at the time of birth, Rudabe was experiencing great pain and was almost dying. So Zal decided to burn one of Seymour's feather so that he would come to rescue his wife, Zal's wife, and that Zal could, and that Sam, and that Rudabe could give birth to Rostam. And therefore he burned the feather, and Seymour came, and Rudabe lived and gave birth to Rostam, who was now very important in this story, because in our story, or this legend, he was the person who saved Persia, who always fought for the kings against the enemies. Now the story of Seymour's feather. So there were 3 feathers. The first one was burned for Rudabe to give birth to Rostam. And then Zal gave the feathers to Rostam so that in case he faces any difficulty in his life, or he could burn the feather, and that Simurgh would come to his rescue. Rostam now is growing up, and he is a very strong man. At the age of 10, they say that he could carry a cow, lift a cow and carry it from one end of the field to another. He was so strong. And as he grew older, he became stronger and stronger. And later on, he was sort of employed or called for duty by the king to serve the Persian civilization, Iranian civilization, from the enemies. Rostam went through a long, hard time. He was fighting the enemies, he was fighting the devils, he was fighting the monsters, and all the time he was victorious. And he never ever burnt the second feather or third feather. Even when later on he married Sudabe and gave birth to his son Sohrab, and when Sohrab grew up to discover where his father was, because he had heard that his father is a very strong man living in Persia, Iran, and that he would be very happy to find his father. But his father, Rostam, he didn't know that Sohrab was coming to look for him, and even on the battlefield he would not acknowledge that he is Rostam. And when Sohrab, who was now a hero and as strong as Rostam, being employed or called on for duty to fight the Persians, the father and son, they didn't know each other on the battlefield, and they fought against each other. And all this time Sohrab was asking Rostam about his father Rostam, and Rostam would not acknowledge that he is Sohrab's father, because he wanted to be sort of unknown, and that he would just say, I am a simple soldier, and a simple soldier of Persia should be frightened, should be so strong, and the Persian soldiers are so strong that Rostam is much more stronger than any other Persian soldiers or Iranian soldiers, and that Sohrab should not try to invade Persia, because there is Rostam, who is stronger than anybody else. Okay, as Rostam and his son were fighting against each other on the battlefield, at many occasions Sohrab who was of course Rostam's son, tried to again ask Rostam about who is this Rostam. Where I want to speak to him. I want to see him once. But Rostam would not admit that about his identity. So what happened was they fought each other for a long time, maybe for a couple of days, few days, and at each occasion, Sohrab, because he was now younger, was almost beating and winning the fight against Rostam. But then Rostam would ask for a break, and he would come back and he would think about this young man, his Sohrab, that he did not know was his son. And he was saying that this young man is going to kill me. After a couple of days, they were fighting, and somehow Rostam tricked to beat his Sohrab, and as he was on the ground, Rostam took out a dagger and stabbed Sohrab, not knowing that Sohrab was his son. And the tragedy begins here when Sohrab tells Rostam that if my father, Rostam, finds out that you have killed me and you have stuck your dagger inside me, he would seek revenge. At that time, Rostam suddenly realized what big mistake he had made, and he had stabbed his own son. And he asked his the other soldiers around him from his camp to run and go and get help and some medication so that he could heal Sohrab. And so these soldiers, they went running around and they found the medication, and they brought the medication to Rostam to heal Sohrab, his son. But when the medication reached Rostam's hand, it was too late. Sohrab had already passed away. So as you can see here, even at that occasion, he did not burn the second feather of Simurgh. So afterwards, Rostam was very sad and very angry at himself, with himself, that he had killed his own son. Many years go past, and then in another fight, he was fighting Esfandiar. Esfandiar was one of the Persian princesses whose strength was almost equal to Rostam, if not more. And they were fighting, and Esfandiar did not want to have anyone as strong as him in Persia, and decided to fight Rostam so that he would prove that he is stronger than Rostam. After fighting each other on the field, because here Rostam's reputation was at stake, and also Esfandiar's reputation as a hero was at stake. Esfandiar, who was a prince, he was trying to show the Persian that you have a very you are going to have a very strong Persian king and a sort of king who can defeat Rostam. So he was fighting for his reputation. And also Rostam was fighting for his reputation. This battle was going on, this fight was going on between Rostam and Esfandiar. And it went on for many days till finally Rostam felt very weak, and he was so wounded that he could not continue the fight. At this stage, he asked Esfandiar for a break, and he went back to his camp and was thinking about what he should do. He is almost so wounded and tired that he could not continue the fight with Esfandiar, and his wounds were so bad and he didn't know what to do at the time. So he took the second feather of Simurgh and burnt it. Simurgh flew and came to Rostam's side and brought with himself some medication plants that would be very healing for Rostam's wound. So he asked Rostam to rub the medication, the plants, the extract, the juice to his wounds so that he would recover. And Rostam listened to Simurgh and he rubbed the medication to his body and he was fully recovered. And Simurgh said, I'm going to tell you a secret. If you want to win against Esfandiar, Esfandiar's weakness is his eyes. And it's just like Achilles, that his heel was his point of weakness, and was finally killed at Troy by an arrow going through his leg, his knee. The same happened with Esfandiar. Rostam took out an arrow and aimed for Esfandiar's eyes. And the arrow went through Esfandiar's eye and Esfandiar died. So this is this is the second feather. But in Shahnameh, Ferdowsi, if you read the Shahnameh of Ferdowsi, you will never ever discover what happened to the third feather. This is very symbolic because Zal, that Simurgh is considered to be the country of Iran, Persia, and that the third feather should be used for Persia, for Iran, at very necessary time. Perhaps Ferdowsi knew that there were, in the future, there are going to be more evil rulers in Persia, like Zahak. I'm going to tell you the story of Zahak later, that the Persians or the Iranian would need to burn the third feather. So this is the story of the Seymour's three feathers.